All right, everybody. We are here to talk about music licensing with my friend Chris SD. And we're going to be talking a lot about music licensing over the next week or so because Chris has graciously offered to come and talk to you guys. And those of you who are here are going to get a rare opportunity to ask questions specifically. You can put things in the chat if you have questions that you came with already about music licensing. And I'm going to let Chris introduce himself. But, in my mind, what this is for is to help you guys figure out if this is an income path for you and a fan building path too. I'm here to be kind of the conduit to help musicians find the things that are going to work right for them, their life, what they want to achieve with their music career. And I want to make sure that, before you go down this path, that this is the right path for you. So that's why we're here. So I'm going to turn it over to Chris, let him introduce himself and give you a little sense of who he is if you don't know already. I've obviously been bringing him into my community over the past several years. If some of you listened to our previous podcast episodes, I kind of said that was our most popular episode of last year. So some of you may be familiar with him, but I'm just going to let him give a little bit of a sense of who he is and why he does what he does, and then he can run with this.
Thanks so much, Bree. Thanks for having me in, to talk to your community again. It's so nice to be invited for this. I really enjoy these more intimate, smaller calls. I'm often on these sort of big things. We're doing something very soon. There'll be like tens of, there's a lot of people going to be there, just thousands of people. So this is great to do something so intimate like this. So yeah, just a really quick thing about me. If you're new to me, my name is Chris SD. I run a platform, a company, a organization. I hate all those words. But really, I help indie songwriters connect with music supervisors, and I call that sync songwriter is what it is. So my whole thing was I've been producing records for over 20 years. And back when I was in the studio, I used to work with major label artists and indie artists. And the indie artists would often, have just as good music as the major labels. But when it came time to getting the record out, right, putting it out releasing it after all the hard work we put into it, so often it would just disappear into the ether, just crickets, nothing would happen with it. So I started thinking, how can I support the artists, that are in my studio? How can I get their record to do something? And part of it honestly was selfish too, because I was working really hard, cutting them a really good deal. And I wanted to see the music do something, it wasn't really about the money. It was about just, music is a language. You're a songwriter. And the whole idea is to get your music out there in a much bigger way, hopefully, than it is now, because it's next to impossible, right? These days, this is just a fact. If you're an indie songwriter, musician, artist, you're competing against everybody who has a record out, and everybody has a record out. There are millions and millions of songs out there. 100,000 per day get uploaded to Spotify. So how are you ever going to stand out of the noise, right? Like, how are you ever going to build an audience? And I'm not just saying that rhetorically. I'm not saying that, as being sort of dour. I see it like it's the reality. The reality is it's really, really, really hard to get your music out there. If you do it for hobby, that's great. You can do it all you want and have your friends, family, and a few fans and build a little social media stuff online and everything. But if you're trying to make a change, if you're trying to communicate to the world, if you're trying to be heard, there's got to be a way to do that, And so all of that said, that was one of the biggest problems that the indie artists I was working with in the studio had. So I looked around and I started seeing this thing called music licensing. And I thought, well, that sounds kind of corporate. I don't know why I'd even want to get involved in something like that, But the more I looked into it and the more I heard more and more artists going around like, oh man, I paid my rent for a year with one sync placement. Or like I got in Billboard magazine, or something crazy would happen and I'd be like, what is this? And so the labels all died off. That was during the big die off of all the labels when that was happening, and it became like not to be it wasn't uncool anymore to get into a show, a movie, or an ad, because you weren't stuck with like 20 channels on cable anymore, right? There was like streaming starting to Netflix was like, what's this Netflix thing, you know? And the cooler shows started to come out, much more of a diversity of things started to happen. So it was like you could get into a show where, you know, that you would watch and that you knew that people like you would watch. So you'd think like, well, wait a minute. If my music's in that show, those are my ideal fans watching that show. So this becomes like a really smart thing. You can get paid in the thousands of dollars for sync placements. That's actually typical. And I got $30,000 for somebody, you know, like there's lots of money to be made in the sync industry, but that's not the reason I got into it. And I don't think that people should ever think that way, like, oh, I'm going to get into sync licensing because I want to, you know, get rich or something, you know, any more than somebody should say, well, I'm just going to get into real estate or hedge funds or like whatever, you know, just to make the money. You know, you've got to at least enjoy what you do or hopefully love what you do. And I'm assuming if you're here, you love what you do, or maybe you don't, you feel compelled to do. If you're like me, you feel compelled to do what you do. You feel compelled to write music. Like your life without music would be like not having an arm or something, you know? That's most songwriters that I know. So then if let's consider that's our mutual problem, you know, our mutual thing that we've got to fix or conquer or figure out, then the problem becomes, well, how do we get the music out there in a big way? So again, that's how sync licensing came around. And there were a couple of problems here. Was a lot of artists said, well, hey, you know what? I'm going to get into a music library, or I'm going to get a sync agent. And that's going to solve everything because they do all this stuff on the, you know, in the background. Maybe even when I'm sleeping, you know, in the morning, they're up at like 7 in the morning and they're out there pitching music and stuff to the TV and film industry. And they have all the connections. I can write songs, send them to them. Yeah, they take half my money, but you know, this is why not get somebody who's a pro doing it for me? Sounds really good. Sounds great. And in fact, agencies and libraries are really important to the industry. But for indie songwriters, they're not a very good idea. And the reason why is because back to that thing where everybody and their dog has a record out, you're in there with hundreds of thousands, often, you know, the Paramount has like 4 million tracks in it. So you're like this needle in a haystack. You know, it's like playing a lottery. So agencies and libraries are super, super hard to get anything, you know, if you, and you can poll all your friends and say, hey, who's gotten a sync placement from a library and agent? And you probably will find one, maybe two who are like, oh, 2017, you know, I got this thing and ended up in a soap opera, or I got this one. Maybe there's one good one too. But most everybody else is going to be like big fat zero, right?
I've gotten
Nothing.
tiny ones. I've gotten like my song is in an exercise video that someone produced locally or something weird like that, right?
Yeah. And how much money did you make?
$130 or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, right. So, and that was like, are you getting 5 or 7 of those a year?
No.
No, it happened like once, right?
Right.
So, yeah. So the way to get your music into TV and film the right way is to connect directly with the people who actually put it in there. Skip over the middlemen and go straight to the people who actually put the music into TV and film. Problem is that's super, super hard to do, right? Because so first off, those are called music supervisors. They're the people who are hired by the movie studios, TV studios, ad agencies to find music. So like when the producers and directors of a film or something are busy with the script and the shooting and the casting and the locations and, you know, just getting the whole thing put together, they don't have time for the music. So they hire these music supervisors to basically go and find the music and clear it for their productions. So the music supervisors are the people you want to know. Now, the problem is everybody wants to know them, right? The publishers want to know them. The labels want to know them. The agents that we just talked about want to know them. The libraries we just talked about want to know them. And so then you're like, well, you know, how could I ever break into that? area because it's a closed, very closed group, right? They can't possibly listen to all the music that gets sent to them, like cold emails and even their go-to people. Everybody wants to get placements. So you need to figure out how am I going to get face to face with them or them to hear my music in a real way. And that is what I specialized in. So early on with the independent songwriters I was working with in the studio, I started to meet supervisors and connecting the indie songwriters with the supervisors. I didn't want to be a middleman. I didn't want to be an agent. I didn't want to kind of be that thing. I wanted to be a conduit. I wanted to be a matchmaker. And so that's what I started doing was kind of putting indie artists I was working with in the studio, getting them in touch with supervisors face to face. So that's kind of, Bree, you just asked me, like, can you introduce yourself? Here we are,
I
like
should have
15
known.
minutes later. So, but anyway, I just wanted to give, everybody like a well-rounded kind of view about sort of what I do, who I am, why I do what I do, where I came from, how it happened. And so there you have it. So my whole goal is to connect indie songwriters like you directly to the people at the top of the TV and film industry.
No, I think that's really good because that gives them an idea of what kind of questions they can ask you now. So I'd love
Yeah,
you
yeah.
guys to put any questions in the chat. I don't know, Chris might even be willing to bring you on, to talk. I don't know.
Yeah,
I'd love
sure.
that.
Yeah, totally.
Okay, so you guys can put a question in the chat, or you can say, I have a question, and then I can unmute you if you want, if you are in a place that you can do that. But I just wanted to kind of jump off with something that I kind of wrote that's coming out in my newsletter tomorrow. But like, I think people feel like if their music is not like mainstream or, if it's kind of quirky or weird or like it's retro or whatever, that they wouldn't be a good candidate for music licensing. And I feel that that is the absolute opposite, but I'd love to hear your take on that, Chris.
Yeah, so a lot of people think that you got to write for sync, right? You got to look at shows and movies and ads and think, well, what do I have to write to get it into the shows? So I got to compromise my art. I've got to figure out how to become like this producer type. There are people who do that. They write for sync licensing. They're very adept. They're prolific. They're usually highly skilled producers with big connections. And they produce and produce and produce. And they write things for specific spots. And they have to do it very, very quickly. So it's doable for sure. But the vast majority of all independent music that gets into TV and film is artist music. It's songwriter music. And here's the reason why, is because music supervisors, they want authenticity. They don't want something that sounds like it's trying to be something. They want the real deal. They want it written from the heart and soul of the creator. And that is the thing that's actually going to really, move the audience that's watching the show, movie, or ad, right? In the movie theater, they want that the biggest emotional impact they can get. So if you write a song that comes from your heart and they can pair that with the right storyline and it's got the right fit, you can't beat it. So that's like a thing. So always think about the way to go, or the most recommended way to go, is to look at not producing music for things that you see, produce your music first, and then target your music to things that want the music. Now, if you write, as you were saying, Bree, some people write different kinds of stuff and all that. I helped two independent songwriters get music into the biggest film of the year, right? Anora. It won 5 Oscar awards. And that was huge. I mean, one of the guys lives in a small town outside of Ottawa, Canada, and he's never even come close to Hollywood or anything. And I got him face to face with a supervisor in New York City, and he got tracks in there. Same with the other songwriter. Guess what genres they were? People would think, oh, it must have been like mainstream pop or like something like that. Nope, jazz and Russian hip hop.
Whoa.
So there's a place for every song. Like there's all kinds of stuff, right? You write Tibetan throat singing, meditation music. Like there is a place for everything. Now you may not have as many opportunities as say like a pop or, pop, rock, country, hip hop, the big four, but it doesn't matter because then you become the big fish in a small pond, right? Is because there's not that many people doing more esoteric music, or maybe you write super like lo-fi stripped down Americana or something, for example. And there are places for that, you know, and if you're good at that, supervisors want to know you because you've got that thing that nobody else does just the way you do it. So,
That's awesome.
yeah.
And I mean, heck, like, why would we want to create something that was just for something and we probably didn't connect to it? And, it's so much better to be able to just create from our own soul and then find a place for it.
Absolutely. No, that's I think that's way better because then you get to stay the artist, you get to stay true to your fans, you get to stay true to you, you know? And I'm not dissing people who just write for a job or just like I don't care what it sounds like and it's, I don't have to have feeling in it. Whatever. That's cool. Everyone should be able to do what they want to do. But if you're a songwriter, like most songwriters, you write from a place or a concern or a feeling or whatever that is. Know that that is can be worth a car, essentially.
Especially if you're a songwriter slash artist, because then you're gonna do other things with those songs. So you're gonna write them
Yeah.
anyway. You're gonna release them. You're gonna perform them, all that stuff. And then if you can find another way to make money and find new fans with them, why not?
Right. Well, and Bree, this ties into the thing I was saying earlier, right? Is the exposure is the big deal in sync licensing. So if you think about if you create a song that's you and you put it out and it gets a big sync placement and you get all those fans, like I just pick a random example, Pain Hustlers. So I know an artist who got into the movie Pain Hustlers and their Spotify spins went way off the charts. They landed in Billboard magazine. They had festivals calling them. They had all kinds of crazy stuff started to happen for them. They were written up in a big magazine, best artist of the year, just from the sync placement. Like they hadn't even heard of them before. It did more for that artist's career than anything he had done up to that point. He was like 40 years old. He had been doing it for 20 years. And just that one placement was massive. And so that's the kind of thing. Now think about the fact that he wrote as an artist. So when people Shazammed his music and found out who he was, and that just fed into it. It's like a snowball. Had he written something that was like not really his genre and managed to get it into the movie, that would have been it. It would have ended there, right? It would have been, he would have got paid, and that's about it.
Yep.
Nothing would happen. So
I think it's just a thing now too, to like for shows to have like Spotify playlists for their soundtrack. And because I remember last year I talked about this when we were talking about sync licensing, is that my daughter liked the show Arcane, and
yeah,
she liked like one or two songs from it, but then she just liked the playlist and would listen to the whole playlist. And I'm like, who's this? And she's like, I don't know. And then she'd look at it, and so now I know all these French artists, like random artists that I would never have listened to because of that.
yeah,
And I like their
that's
music.
absolutely. I mean, that's it. Sync licensing is like the last bastion of being able to get huge exposure really quickly. Back in the day, it was labels, right? And then they all kind of died off after Napster and, eventually disappeared. I mean, there's still the Taylor Swifts and, there's some majors left for the really top echelon. But if you're going to make it as an artist, now it's like, well, if you can't get a label deal, which is super, super hard, then you got to just do it on your own, right? You got to do it on social and promote yourself and figure out how else are you going to get your music out there. But everyone's doing the same thing. So music licensing is like the last kind of big, um, you know, sort of like a legacy thing where you can ride on the coattails of the movie studios and the TV studios to reach millions of people potentially.
Yep. Yep. It's super awesome. Okay, so I'm gonna start with the questions, and while I do that, I'm actually gonna throw our link in the chat for the panel. If you guys haven't signed up for the music supervisor panel that's coming up on Sunday, it's going to be killer. It's like what, five music supervisors that they're going to talk very candidly about what they are looking for in music, and it's a huge deal. So I would definitely sign up for it. And I'll put it in the chat in a second. It's a really easy
Yeah.
link for you to remember. But the first question is, do we need to have a massive following to even be considered for music licensing?
That's a great question. And Bree, I just want to say about that the panel there, just to qualify this, is that the supervisors are not only going to be talking about where they find indie music, what they're looking for now, why they love supporting indie artists, but most importantly, you're going to find out how you can actually connect with them face to face. Like that's I only do this once a year, completely free, and I want to give indie songwriters an opportunity to get their foot in the door to find out how does all this work. I don't want to have to, move to LA or New York or Nashville or something to make this happen. How can I get my music in front of them? And that's what the panel's going to answer. So, in terms of a following and stuff, a lot of people think you got to have a buzz, you got to have something that has happened, and in your career or whatever, have some sort of name. None of that matters. And none of it matters. I mean, maybe as a curiosity, right? The supervisor might be like, oh, you open for so and so, or you've got however many followers, or that's cool. But essentially, it all comes down to the music. It doesn't matter at all in sync licensing where you come from, how old you are, what genre of music that you write. None of that matters. It just comes down to the music. And so that's the beauty of it. And the other really cool thing is you can treat it like an artist and say, wow, I'm using this for promotion and I'm getting my music out there in a big way and I'm becoming a household name. And, you want to build that sort of kind of maybe career and start bigger tours and stuff. Or you can totally like sit in the shadows. You can just have it under like a label name. You can like get these big sync placements, make, copious amounts of money if you get good placements, and have these huge things that you can show your friends, but stay out of the limelight. That's another really cool thing. So anyway, following doesn't matter whatsoever.
Awesome. Awesome. So this was an interesting question. So if you consider yourself a conduit between you and the supervisors, how do you kind of do, say, matchmaking between people that you work with and the supervisors? Like, do you really get to know the music of the artists?
Oh, do I? No, 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 no. Yeah, let me explain this. This is really important. So, because I'm not, okay, for one, I'm not an elitist. Okay, so I don't sort of go and say, you're good, you're no good. So I'm only going to work with you and I'm not going to work with you. There's a great story that I'll tell about the Beatles. It's very fast. That is also, I saw it through my whole producing career, is that when the Beatles kind of were trying to get signed, they got rejected, right, by like 11 labels or something, because they were popular at the Cavern and stuff, but they weren't actually that good. Like they didn't even write their own songs yet. And so George Martin signed them, right, famously signed them to EMI because he was a part of EMI at the time. And when he was asked why he signed them, he said, I signed them not because I thought they were great or anything. He said, I signed them because when they walked into a room, I felt uplifted. And when they left, I felt diminished, meaning that he saw something in them. He saw this potential, and that's why he signed them. I had a woman approach me, she's, I don't know, 40s or something like that. And she's like not not an artist even or anything. She wrote a song on her keyboard into her smartphone and sent it to me and said, I'd like to get this placed. And I said, okay, well, first of all, I have an online studio, so I helped her produce the song for her. And then she ended up getting 4 placements with it.
Whoa.
So she was like, she was like the Beatles in 1963 or whatever. It's like she didn't have anything else. So I'm not an elitist that way. So how I connect people is that if you're a good person and you have a dream of doing what you want to do, there is a way to get there. Just like that woman, just like the Beatles. And so if I work with you, I can't work with everybody, obviously, but if I can work with you, what happens is that I end up, you have to learn some things about the sync industry before I introduce you because you have to be trusted. Supervisors, I'll just give you a couple of crazy examples. Like sometimes independent artists, like they'll have a sample in there that they don't know is illegal, right? So it ends up in a big movie or a big show, and there's this huge legal problem. There's been cases where, someone has come out of the woodwork after the fact and said, oh, I'm the, let's pick on guitar players today. So I'm the guitar player, and I was in the room when that was written, and I think I own 10%, and I disagree with this sync. I want all this money. That is like the the end of the career for a supervisor, right? So they have to be able to trust you. And that's what I do is I show you all the things you need to know before I introduce you. And then I literally put you face to face with these supervisors, online, obviously, right? You can be anywhere. You don't have to fly to LA or anything like that. And that way they get to know you. They get to hear your music live right in front of you, ask you questions about it. You can explain it to them. They can give you their email address. They can give you their disco account. Say, I'd love to hear more. Do you have more stuff you can send me? I'm looking for this, this, this. You're like, yes, I do. That's where the magic. That's how come we get so many placements at Sync Songwriter. In Grey's Anatomy and SWAT and like all. SWAT just ended. We had somebody got in the season finale of SWAT. We just heard about the new Handmaid's Tale show that's coming up. Going to be coming out. I already have a songwriter in that one. There's like a guy from Italy I worked with who did a world tour based on his sync placement. It goes on and on and on, but it's about who you know. It's about those relationships and connections.
Yep. Yep. So how good must the production be? I know we always get this question, because it's something that like if it's at the level of what I'm releasing on my own record, is that good enough?
Well, it depends what the level is you're releasing, right?
Yes.
So what it comes down to is that the good news is it doesn't have to sound like the latest Adele record if she ever puts another one out, but it has to be above the bar. It's got to sound as good as everything else in TV and film, and that's not like a huge bar. It's not like crazy. You've got to be above a certain bar. Like it's kind of. I mean, if we're all honest with each other for a second, we know when something's not ready yet, right? We hear it and we're like, well, the production could be better, right? Or the singing could be a little bit better or whatever. Now, that's all subjective, right? We wouldn't go to Bob Dylan and say, well, he needs some singing lessons,
Hmm. Yep.
right?
Yep.
You don't want Bob Dylan to change at all. He's not a classical singer, right? So you've got to figure out what your niche is. If you do like indie pop in your garage, it's supposed to sound like that, but it can't sound like it recorded it on a 4-track, if that makes sense. So the production's the easiest part, honestly. So, and I, plus I've been producing for so long, I just show the people I work with exactly how to do that. It's super simple. The songwriting's the hard part. So I can't help you with that. You've got to be able to write good songs.
That's true. Now, this is a question that I'm sure you've been getting constantly about AI.
Oh yeah, sure.
Are they just starting to use AI now because they can just do it cheaply and easily?
Yeah, so the good news there for songwriters is that yes, for on one, they're using it like lower tier stuff, right? So like in soap operas sometimes and like production music and like library production music, that's going to go the way of the dodo bird. That's all going to be done cheap and easy. Those background segue parts and stuff that AI can do pretty easily, right? Just a beat and whatever, and it's not too hard. When it comes to the actual songwriting, so there's a few things. One is AI is still a toy at that level. Now, you could argue and say, well, Chris, wait, there's like some bands that I've seen that have hit Billboard magazine and that are all AI generated, like we were duped and tricked and all that. Behind all of those tracks and those songs are producers or people who really understand how to put music together. So instead of using MIDI or samples or using AI prompts. So, grandma's not, typing in like, write me a Tom Petty hit, that's not gonna fly, right? So there's that element. The other bigger element, kind of moving up the chain here, the bigger element of this is that you don't own the copyright. As much as an AI company says to you, like, oh, whatever you come up with on our website, you can use however you want. The Copyright Office in the US disputes that. They're like, no, you didn't write the melody. You didn't write the you have to have the melody, of course, and then you've got to have like the other parts of the song that sort of demand how the song is going to turn out, right? Of course, which includes the lyrics and everything as well. So melody and lyrics number one, and then all the other sort of things that sort of go along with that. Now, if you don't own the copyright, there's no way you're going to get your music into TV and film because they don't allow it.
It's
Like
not
that's just
clearable, right?
It's not clearable. So, if you try to pass it off and you get caught, that's a great way to blacklist yourself. Like you'll never ever be doing that again. So currently, supervisors can't use purely created AI music, but you can use AI music as a tool. You can use it to help you with the lyrics, to help you with the melody, and so on, to give you ideas, just like magnets on a fridge or whatever. No one's going to get you for that. But you have to have the human input on the copyright side of things. And then thirdly, the last one, and I think the biggest one, is that AI is someday may usurp humanity in terms of all the things that we can do. It may do it all better, right, than what we can do. And so you start thinking, well, man, then there's no way. How could a human even compete with anything, like let alone music and so on? There's something really important to remember about that, is that every technology that came along, drum machines in the 80s, everyone thought that was the end of drumming. Everyone's just going to use drum machines. It's like, it didn't happen. Auto-tune came along. Oh, that's the end of singers, right? Anybody can sing now, so there's going to be no great singers. We're never going to, treasure them or care, right? Didn't happen. You have to remember also that technology keeps marching forward all the time. Back in the day, orchestras, right, were high tech. That was a big deal. Like that was like cutting edge technology, and Mozart and Beethoven and all those guys were writing for these, crazy ensembles that had these wooden instruments called violins and violas and cellos. And, it was just like, how can a bard with his little lyre compete against that? It didn't kill folk music. It went in parallel. The chess world, another example I love, right? Computers have been able to beat a human, any grandmaster in the world, handily for years, maybe a decade now, maybe 15 years. I don't remember or know. But no one can beat a computer now, right? You just can't, no one can do it. And yet chess is doing fine. Everybody loves, well, I don't watch chess that much, but I see it in the news and I know it's a very healthy sport and it's grown and not dissipated. So there's always going to be a place. People want to go see people play live. People want to do all these things. And when people are looking for music, for key parts that have the right emotion and feel, that is humans for the foreseeable future. It could change down the road, but it's certainly not there yet. So there's no reason to be worried at this point about AI and music if you're a serious songwriter and you're, doing your craft. And, in the end, humanity always wins anyway, right? It's just the way it goes. Because if it wasn't true, then I don't want to get into crazy like geopolitics, but honestly, if you think about, situations in the world, historical situations where people seem to be locked in, maybe say under a dictatorship or something or whatever it was, this thing like, how will this ever end? How could people possibly get out of this? Or, something like that. It just eventually, humans just rose up and figured it out and blasted it to heck. So just remember that. Just remember that you don't have to compete with AI. It'll let it do its thing, let it do what it's good at, and you stick to what you're good at.
Yeah, that's totally encouraging.
You
I,
bet.
I'm going to cap off the AI conversation with one other question I saw in here about that, and it's about AI production. If you use something like Lander or something else like that to produce the music that you do you know if that would make it ineligible or not?
No, so that's okay. If you own the
Okay.
copyright and you use AI to kind of create some production, you master with AI or whatever, that's fine. That's okay. But the caveat to that, the big important thing is AI's kind of got a sound, right? We all kind of know that.
Yes, it
It's getting
does.
better, but yes, it's still got this weird sheen, especially in the vocals. It doesn't quite sound real. And sometimes you'll be listening to it and the guitars or whatever's supposed to be happening aren't really guitars. They're sort of sounds that remind you or sound like guitars and you listen to them. So just keep that in mind because supervisors, they listen to music all the time. That could really push them away. And there's also the element of, it's kind of not cool. Also, which is a weird, again, going back to that human spirit thing, right? Is that a lot of shows and movies don't want to be associated with AI, right? They want to be associated with like people, and realness. And so I'm not against AI, and I think it should be used as a tool. But just be aware of that as an artist and as a producer. Just remember, don't, you know, push it too hard because it might get rejected strictly on aesthetic, for aesthetic reasons.
Awesome. Okay, I do have one other live question I'm going to get to in a sec, but I just wanted to address one of these up here. Supervisors, are they generally looking for specific genres? Like are they in a lane, or are they just whatever show they have needs a certain feel and that's what they're looking for?
Depends on the show, right?
Okay,
There's some shows that are set down in, I don't know, making this up here, like the bayous, right? And you're
right.
pretty much never going to hear anything remotely close to Taylor Swift. Right? It's unless maybe it's a car going by, maybe, but it's going to be swampy, like of the region and stuff like that. There are other shows that have a lot of like diversity in them. You hear a hip hop track and a rock track and classical, some string quartet thing doing whatever. Some shows have composers on them still. They all used to be like that, but there's sort of a lot fewer of them now that do that because it's expensive for them to do that. It's a lot cheaper to pay you $10,000 than pay a major label $100,000 or hire a composer full time,
Mm.
to create all that. So, yeah, the trick is finding out which shows, movies, and ads essentially have the kind of music that you write, and then you target those types of things.
Got it. Okay, so
Yeah,
Katya
but
has a question.
sorry, Bree, I gotta add one thing in.
Yeah.
Don't, please make sure, don't come back to me and say, Chris, you said, I should just target these people and that's how I should do it. The problem is you're not going to get a hold of them.
Right.
That's the big problem because everybody's cold emailing all kinds of people, and you wouldn't believe how much music, especially this time of year, that people send me. It's like, can listen to this. I'm like, I can't, I can't, I can't, I can't, I can't. I don't have time to listen to all the music that gets sent to me. So that's like times 1,000, maybe times 1,000,000 for supervisors. So
I would believe it. Just running the podcast that I run, I get so much music. It's incredible. So yeah,
yeah.
it's really all about the relationship.
Though I'm not a middleman, I don't take cuts of people's music, and I don't act at all like that kind of middle person and hold. Like I'm more interested in you meeting a music supervisor directly, and you have the relationship with them. Like you should carry those relationships forward. You
Mhm.
shouldn't. I shouldn't hold you back. See, the problem with a middle person, right, or a real gatekeeper, is what happens is that they are the people that are in control of the relationship. So say there's an agent. The agent has the relationship with the supervisor. So the supervisor comes along and says, "Hey, I'm looking for these kind of songs." The agent says, "No problem." And then let's say you're on the agency. The agent's got this huge roster of artists and songs. So the agent goes in and collects like a few songs out of the thousands of songs or whatever that are in there, takes them, and then brings them to the agent, to the supervisor, sorry. And the supervisor says, cool, I like this song. This is great. Then they place it. Supervisor's super happy. The agent's happy. They got the sync placement. They're getting a percentage. You're in there, and let's say you're the person that your song got picked. And you're super happy, right? Like you get the call, you're like, or email, and you're like, oh, this is amazing. You go to dinner, maybe celebrate, you tell your friends about it. It's going to be on here, watch it. And then you see it, and you're just over the moon, and it's awesome. And then it's over. And then the supervisor comes back to the agent and says, "Hey, I need some more music. What do you got?" They're hitting up a bunch of different people, including us and all that. And then they say, "What do you have? This?" And the agent goes, "Oh, yeah, I'll get you some more songs." What are the odds of them going in and getting your song?
Mm.
Like, well, you're in there with thousands of other songs. So you're literally playing a lottery. You're sitting in there and the months go by and the years go by and you're just waiting and hoping. Like that's crazy. To me, it's crazy. So the way I do it is that I have all these connections the same way an agent might, but I've built them up over through trust, and supervisors really like what I do because I don't take a cut of the I'm not hustling them. I'm never hustling them. I don't have to, right? Because I'm not making my money from doing that. So what happens is that once a year, this is happening, right? This Sunday, I have the Sync Songwriter Music Supervisor panel. Then I have this, and people will show up to it. We have a lot of musicians. Like it was very popular. We had over 10,000 last year that signed up to attend it, and so on. And of course, I can't work with 10,000 people. It's impossible, ridiculously impossible. So, but people show up, and then I go into this whole thing about how people can work with me and how I can connect them with supervisors. And it's that process. I don't want to get into it now because that's for Sunday,
Okay.
but that's how I do it. And I'm not there picking and choosing. I'm a believer in giving everybody a level playing field. Like I really, really believe that you give everyone a level playing field to come in there, and then you help them as best you can.
Mm.
In the end, it's up to them, right? You can lead a horse to water, right? But ultimately, it comes down to if you write good songs, then you just simply need to be able to get face to face with these people so they can hear your music. Like that's the biggest challenge, right? Because there's all kinds of great songwriters out there. And if we're honest with each other, and I'm being conservative, 99% of all the indie music out there is probably going to drift off to obscurity, right? It's
Yeah.
just the way it is. There's just everybody. Like you probably have someone in your extended family who has a recording out somewhere, you know? So it's just like, it's crazy. It's how many people have recordings. So anyway, I can't answer it
Cool.
all in depth here, but just come out to the panel and it will all become very clear and apparent about how it works.
Good question. Okay, we have about 5 more minutes. If you have any other questions you want to throw in here, I wanted to get this one out there. Someone mentioned there used to be those things called call sheets, or I think of them as briefs,
Oh yeah.
where they would be like, "I'm looking for this, and it's in this style, in this mood, in this genre, etc." Is that kind of how the supervisors work, or how do they work?
No. So, well, yes, they do that. That's briefs are a thing. Absolutely. I'm sure you've heard them. There's a lot of platforms out there that sort of say, "Hey, I have access to briefs, and you pay me, and I'm going to send you briefs and stuff like that." Otherwise, you're not getting briefs unless you're connected with them, right? That's the only other time.
So
But you probably
places like
heard of them.
Taxi and stuff, back in my
Yeah,
day, it was like Taxi.
yeah, exactly. There's and so on. Now we do the same thing. Like I forward briefs from all the supervisors I know to the artists I work with only. But that's like the peanuts on the Sunday. Like that's like the odds of you getting a placement through a brief are legitimate, but that's not really where the sync placements come from, right? That's you're still trying to go through a pinhole, right, with that. The sync placements happen because of the relationships. So I introduce you to the supervisors. So let's take a real quick example. Like how does that work? So a supervisor is inundated, right? Inundated with music from publishers, labels, agencies, and libraries, as I touched on before. And they're basically the most popular person in the world in this section of the world. Everybody wants to get their music into TV and film. So they're inundated with music. And that's only from their go-to people, right? Those are the people that they're willing to hear music from. They're still inundated from them. So then let alone all the people cold emailing and stuff, which typically just goes to the junk folder because they can't even possibly do that. And then they don't trust where it came from and all that stuff. So the trick is if you're on a major label or you're with a publishing company and you're a major label artist, you still don't get a relationship with the supervisors. If you have a huge name, they're going to place you anyway, if you're not too expensive, or they might fork out the money for a placement and stuff like that. If you are connected with the supervisor face to face and they're actually getting to know you in a way and kind of seeing who you are and understanding you, you've gotten like this crazy amount of airtime with them all of a sudden. You're not just a track number or an email or something like that. You're actually like a person with a name and you have an interesting story, even if it's not, you didn't do anything that interesting. It might be interesting. Like, I'm from Wisconsin and I love my dog and I do, whatever it is, they put a face to the thing, just like the two people came on live. Like I know, I'm not great with names, but I'm good with people. I'm good with connecting who a person is, what their demeanor is, what they look like and stuff. And I'm not going to forget them. If I see them again, if I see you again, I'm going to remember you. That's how you want to be with supervisors, right? So when you're in my community, that of course happens a lot more than once. So you're developing real relationships with the soups. And that's how the best way to do it is. So yes, they use briefs, but they're not all of that, if that makes sense.
Awesome. Okay. So someone asked how you can join the community, and that's all going to be discussed at the panel. So definitely go to the panel I've put the link in here, profitablemusician.com/panel, super easy. So if you didn't see it in here to click, just go to that and you can join. One final question, as I know Chris is very busy and needs to jump off here at 4 o'clock my time. If you are a songwriter, but you don't perform your songs, does that make it more difficult to get songs placed?
Nope. Nope.
And does it
You
make it more
can,
difficult to create relationships if you're not the artist?
no, no, not at all. You can, like I said, you can rep people and it doesn't matter. It just comes down to the song. If you hired a lead singer, who sang your song, as long as you're the copyright owner, they're not going to care, right? I mean, they do like supporting artists and stuff like that and overall, but it's a small thing. If you're like, hey, I'm just not a great singer, or I don't enjoy performing. I actually don't play instruments. I'm a lyricist. I have a partner. They don't care about any of that stuff. They just care about who owns the copyright. Is the song good, right? And is the production, good enough to get into TV and film, which is not that difficult to do. So that doesn't, yeah, you're good to go.
Okay, so this last question is what should we have in place before we start submitting? Do we have to have a library set up, and do we have to know about stems and all that kind of stuff? And is that going to be discussed on Sunday?
Yeah, great question. So essentially, there are things you need to know, and there's things you need to know about what not to do, right? And that's things that I, you know, teach the people that I work with. I show them what those things are. So in between now and Sunday, the reason Sunday exists and why your first step is to go to the panel is because I don't want to be somebody who shows up, there's a million people online, right? That like doing what I do, right? Not just in licensing, but in all kinds of things, right? There's all kinds of like offers and people out there like, oh, I'm the person to listen to. And you're like, you haven't even done what you're what you're teaching. So there's all these things. I don't want to be that person. I don't want to be somebody coming to you and like, hey, trust me, and you should like listen to what I'm saying because you don't really know me, right? And I get that because I'm the same in reverse, right? I'm very skeptical when it comes to things like that. So what I want to do is I want songwriters to come and don't take my word for it. Come to the panel to actually meet the people who do it. Like I'm not the guy. I'm the conduit. Like I'm the matchmaker. I'm like the doorman. So, but I want you to meet the people who actually do it and then hear about like how they use indie music, why they work with me, why they work with people like me, where they find their music, what they're looking for now. Like you get such a window into what these people do. And we're going to have like Matt from Anora there. We're going to have Justin from Grey's Anatomy there. Like these are like, I work with top music supervisors. So you're going to hear from the top, the biggest, best stuff you want to get into. You're going to hear from those people and they're cool. They're like us. They love music. They're either musicians, hang out with musicians. They're not like these suits and ties that sit in ivory towers. So you're going to be able to hear from these really, really nice people about the inside scoop and how all that works from an indie songwriter point of view. And then you're going to understand how all this thing works, right? And you're going to hear it from them and not just me, if that makes sense. So that's why the panel is so important. That's why I put it on for free, is because I just don't want songwriter. I don't want to be that guy trying to like sell it. You know what I mean? Like I'm trying to give an opportunity here, right? Yes, I make a living at it. Of course, you got to do something in our lives to do that. And I work really hard at it. So that's important, but it's got to be real. It's got to be authentic. It's got to be like transparent. It's not like taking one of your songs and mailing it off with money to somebody who says, I'm going to check your song out. And if it's good, I'm going to put it into something. It's like, that's so opaque. Like, you don't know what's really going on. I'm not saying they're doing anything bad, but we don't know, right? I want you to be able to see it, not only like transparently, but like understand what the opportunity is. Like, be like, whoa, okay, so I can actually potentially connect with these people. And then you find out exactly how you can do that in this really normal way. That's why I do that. So.
Awesome. That's a great explanation. And just in closing, I want to say that you really walk your talk when it comes to relationships because the thing is, you guys, the way he mostly promotes this panel and gets the word out to people is through relationships, right? That's why he's here. That's why he gets me to tell you about it because hopefully you trust me if you've been in my community for a while and he wants, like he said, you don't know him, but you know me somewhat and hopefully that transfers and that translates and that's how he does the whole relationship thing with the supervisors. And so it's his whole business is really about relationships, which I appreciate. And I've worked with him and known him forever and we know each other in person. I have a picture with us back there on the bookshelf back there. So
Oh, that's awesome, Bree. Thanks.
yeah, it was from one of the dinners that we had one
Oh
time when
yeah.
we were in LA. So,
Yeah.
it really is all about relationships and I know I built my business a lot through relationships and I would encourage all musicians, whether it's relationships with band members and side musicians and producers and you need relationships. That's
Yeah.
the best way to move your career forward.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be a dirty word, in
Mm.
in
Yeah,
licensing
like
like
networking can get a real bad rap.
yeah, like
Yeah.
schmoozing and like and
Yeah.
all that. It's not about that. And you don't have to be like extroverted or it doesn't even matter. Like you're not fighting for attention. So it
Yeah.
becomes it's a more of a one-on-one type of thing. So that's way different. So and again, it comes down to the music. So if you think like, oh, I'm not really a networker, or I don't really do well in music, in relationships. I like writing songs in my bedroom or whatever. It's just if you can talk to the grocer, you can talk to a music supervisor. It's basically it.
I love that. That brings it down to earth. I love
It
that.
it really is down to earth. Honestly, like you'd be surprised because it sounds like all this like, oh, trying to get placements in these like big movies and stuff. It's got to be like this really Hollywood vibe. It's like, no, not really. Behind the scenes is actually not like that. They're hardworking people who care. Not all of them, but the people I work with are certainly like that.
That's encouraging, and I think that's who's here. So, you guys, if you haven't signed up for the panel, profitablemusician.com/panel. I appreciate you setting this time aside for my community and
Of
interacting with
course.
everybody. Thank for you that asked questions and came on live, and appreciate you guys spending an hour with us. And we will see you at the panel.
Amazing. It was great to see everybody. And Bree, thank you. It's always a pleasure. So glad to do this
Absolutely.
anytime.